Hey, Tori.
Hi, Dr. Suslak. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you
Okay.
great.
There's some heavy cat action going on right on the other side of this laptop. And so kitchen things, but hopefully all is good.
Well, I just put my headphones in because I usually have heavy dog action behind me, so you're not alone. Yay, Mackenzie, you're here. I was concerned that you might still be stuck in your car. All right, looks like we're still waiting for Sara Friedman. So we'll wait a minute or two and let other folks trickle in. Hi, June. How are you?
I'm good. I was a little too excited for Thanksgiving and just made a pre-Thanksgiving meal.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm trying to prevent that food coma.
Mm.
June, what did you make?
I made mashed potatoes and gravy and stuffing and these soy chicken nuggets, which are amazing, by the way.
You might have to circulate those recipes in the chat.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. I think we have most everybody here. Hi all, welcome, happy Friday. I hope you either already have or are planning to get outside today if you're in Bloomington, because it's really enjoyable weather. I wanted to start our session off today with a short check-in. I'm sure this week has been difficult for all of us as we wait on pins and needles for the election outcome, while also still navigating online classes in the midst of the pandemic. And one of the benefits of the PWS series is that we have folks from several different program stages, but also different life stages in one area, in one space. So I'd like to take advantage of that and give us an opportunity to very briefly learn from one another by sharing in the chat one thing that you've done this week or that you plan to do this weekend to keep yourself grounded and to take care of yourself. So we'll maybe take 1 minute just to briefly share, drop in the comment box in the chat, one thing that you have done or that you plan on doing this weekend to keep yourself grounded and to exercise some self-care. Hi, Gaia, welcome. You just came in. I'll just let you know that we are dropping in the chat one thing that we have done this week or that we plan on doing this weekend in terms of self-care. So if you want to just drop a quick comment in there, we're starting our session out that way before we get started with our topic. Great, very cool. So what I'd like to see is, I really wanted to do that just generally to share what we're all doing, but also I think it's nice to see what's working for others and maybe glean a few tips or strategies for yourself. So does anyone want to share maybe one thing they saw in the chat that they hadn't thought of that maybe they want to start doing?
I like yours of not checking the news.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to adopt that today.
It's a good boundary. You can still check, but
I don't have that kind of willpower. If you do, that's amazing, and I applaud you. But that's not even a realistic possibility for me.
okay, that's fair enough.
I like the bike riding to the beach. That's the one that I'm gonna.
I was gonna say I really like that one too. I mean, I'm not close to the beach, but like biking somewhere intentionally to sit and look, I think is a good idea.
Mackenzie, if you start now, you could hit the beach by like the weekend.
By the time our final paper for H500 is due.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyone else want to pinpoint one thing they saw in the chat that they'd like to start doing for themselves?
I like Kirsten's idea of taking naps. I keep forgetting that's like such a good way to just like, you know, just take a break and reset. And then when I wake up, maybe a bit too late in the afternoon, like it just feels refreshing. So I dig that one.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate you sharing. Just wanted to take advantage of some time to hear from others and make sure that we are checking in with ourselves as we go into the weekend. So let's go ahead and get started with our topic for today, which is good mentorship and what you need and should expect from mentorship relationships in graduate school. So today we have Dr. Dan Suslak, linguistic anthropologist and associate professor of anthropology, as well as associate faculty in Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. So Dr. Suslak, if you wouldn't mind waving so everybody can see your face. And then we also have with us today as our graduate student facilitator, Mackenzie DiMarco, who is a third-year PhD student in archaeology and social context. Mackenzie also served as president for the Anthropology Graduate Student Association last year. If you were not involved, you missed some really fantastic initiatives that she put forth. She was and continues to be really dedicated to the graduate student experience and being there for all graduate students. So I'm sure at the end of this session, if you continue to have questions, she would be happy to answer them, as would, I'm sure, Dr. Suslak. So let's go ahead and jump in. Our format today is going to be a bit different than usual. We're going to start by breaking out into groups where I'd like you guys to talk with your fellow members about certain scenarios that may have actually come up, or maybe they're hypothetical scenarios where you might have to navigate working with an advisor or a mentor. Maybe they are questions you would have or circumstances you'd run into where you'd like some advice or insight from both of our facilitators. So we'll take about 10 minutes to talk as a group, come up with maybe 2 or 3 situations or scenarios that might be difficult to address or navigate in the advisor-advisee relationship, and then we'll bring them to the main session. Okay? Awesome. So bear with me as I divide us up into groups.
And while Tori's doing that, I'll say we decided that Dan and I would sit this segment, this 10-minute small group segment out so you all can talk freely amongst yourselves without
maybe Sarah and I, maybe Sarah and I will exchange our own horror stories about our graduate advisors while you're doing your thing.
But just so you can rest assured, nobody is lurking in your conversation. So
yes, so feel free to speak candidly and then bring those points or situations or scenarios you've identified as a group back to the session. I believe Mackenzie and I, as fellow graduate students, will also be in a breakout group with some of you, and you're all assigned, so I'll go ahead and send you to your groups.
Are you gonna head out to? I think you said you're gonna.
I did, but I don't know if it gives me the ability to assign myself. But maybe I'll just hop into a group that looks like it has low people.
Yeah, you can join. You can choose to join one of them.
Oh, I see. Okay, next to
Yeah.
the title of the group. Great.
Yeah, just
That sounds
amazing. I'm so jealous.
Well, I'll pay for it later, but this week is not the week to, to get a bunch done. So yeah, I think one of the things that I would like to kind of discuss is like how over time little small things that like your advisors don't get that you're saying, how they add up, and then you end up in a situation where because they never got the little things you're saying. Like for instance, my advisors really still don't get that I like teaching more than I like research, and they just won't acknowledge it because I'm really good at both.
Yeah.
And they don't acknowledge that teaching matters to me more, even if it doesn't matter the academy more. And because I never fought back initially, now it's just like,
right.
The problem is too large for me to be like, remember 4 years ago? So that's one thing I'm struggling with.
Yeah, I think I've had like similar experiences with people kind of like advising to what they see your potential as rather than like what you're actually saying to them.
That's a better way to say it, I think. More generalizable. Yeah.
I think that you just have to stand your ground, and people need reminded of things a lot, and I need reminded of things that people have told me, especially students. So like I think that it's never a bad thing to just have a random meeting with your advisor or committee member, whoever, and just remind them of your values and your goals and stick to it whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
And say no. Like, that's something that we all have to learn to do in grad school, is say no. But I think once you get that down to say like, you know what, no, I cannot help you with this research, or no, I'm not going to add this to my dissertation, or no, I'm not going to apply for this grant because I want to dedicate my time right now to teaching, or I want to dedicate my time to whatever it is that you feel is more important. That's my advice.
Lana, do you feel like even when you're explicit, they don't listen?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And they'll pivot to their own experience. Like for instance, I was supposed to do my big girl first job application for a Berkeley job the other day, and I just had an existential crisis instead. And I was trying to express the crisis I was in, and literally their retort was, we had to apply to 10 jobs to get this one. And I'm like,
that's not helpful.
And then with the teaching thing, they'll just be like, you can get a teaching job with a research CV, but you can't get a research job with a teaching CV. So you should really go the one way versus the other, like obvious prioritization of the thing that I'm explicitly telling them I don't see it that way.
Right.
And they'll just be like, but it's objective reality, you're wrong. And I'm just like, cool.
Yeah. I feel like, Mecca, the advice that you gave is something that I need to do. Like I'm in the earlier stage of where Lana's at, if that makes sense. So I'm at the point where it's important to lay that groundwork of like, I don't want to study X. I prioritize and value this over this. And luckily, interestingly enough, with me, my advisor left. She was like, yeah, I don't think, now it took forever for her to do so, which has really put me behind. So when I did confront her and said I'm just not sure, do you feel like you can still advise me based off of where my research is going, which I asked a year ago, she said, of course. And then this summer she said, I can't. So I think while that was really hard and frustrating, ultimately it was probably good that she at least eventually got the cues of this isn't necessarily fitting. And I think the advice I would give someone else is do it sooner.
Oh yeah, I would definitely echo that. Yeah.
Which is, I think, what you were saying, Mecca, of like, you just really have to stick to it.
And also finding outside advisors. Like, I have people that I go to that are outside of anthropology, that are outside of Indiana University, and that's fine. Like, if you're not getting what you need from your main advisor because of whether it's a lack of knowledge or expertise in that field, or it's because they don't agree with your values or priorities, then I don't see any reason why you can't have multiple advisors. Or, I mean, they're not going to be like formally your advisor, but at least like having people you can go to and talk to and have to look at your stuff, you know?
Yeah, I think
Good idea.
giving people concrete advice on how to find it, because I have colleagues and friends that I also like, this non-IU network of folks that I have, but I don't remember how I met all of them and established those relationships. It was probably a very scary email that I sent for at least a couple of them initially, but we don't ever tell young students that that's how you could go about finding non-IU sources to help you develop, like explicitly stating that you could do this, here's what I've done and it worked for me. I don't know where that's communicated unless you show up to this session and talk to people or something,
Yeah, that's true. And I think I've been really lucky because my advisor and committee members have been super like good at connecting me. So they'll be like, you know what, you should talk to this person, you should email this person. And I've been like very lucky, I think, and that I don't think that's as common as it should be.
Yeah.
It's from 1 to 2.
Yeah, and I also think like,
wait, who's running this session? Because there are people in the waiting room.
oh, there are. That's strange.
That was lucky. Tika's my roommate, and she's like, wait, you guys are running this meeting? And I'm like, yeah.
I don't see her.
She doesn't see you.
I see. Okay, hold on. Move to. It says that she's in a group, but it looks like her name is more transparent. So what happened? Okay.
You're in a breakout room limbo, girl.
Well, I can only stay for like 10 minutes.
She has a student appointment.
Oh. Tell her it'll be uploaded if she wants to watch it later.
Yeah. Did you hear that? It'll be uploaded.
Sorry, Tika.
She's probably like, I'll take the time to prepare for the student meeting that I have.
Yeah, that's probably good use of time. Yeah, and I do think like, was somebody else talking?
Oh, I was just gonna ask if there's any other like things people wanted to talk about with issues or. But what were you gonna say, Tori?
Oh no, let's do that first.
Well, I'm just also thinking like technically I have a very on paper good lab at connecting me to people and this, that, and the other. But like I think a big problem that mentorship in graduate school faces is that if you have good mentors, great. But if you don't, and then you learn about how other people have good mentors, but they're not in your field, or you just, that's just not the person you have, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like knowing that it's really actually quite interpersonal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. And I always advise my friends with crappy advisors to just go to other people. Like, that's what we have a committee for, right?
Yeah. That is a
But
good
yeah,
point.
still not fair because they have their own students, you know? So
Yeah, well, and I think in this department, like for instance, if you are an archaeology student and you don't have good mentors, you don't have a lot of choices for who else to go to, right? And then
That's a very good point, Lana.
like it's
Yeah.
like, well, I'm lucky that I have the comp sci side, and most of my self-mentorship is not even on either of my departments, it's elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's like, how many people do I have to talk to before I can get the job done right if all of these other deficiencies are really not my doing? So
Yeah, especially for subfields that are much smaller. And we
yeah,
have
sometimes it's just
not
enough
10 or
and
15
I
people.
gotta, yeah.
Yeah, that's difficult. I do find though, oh, that's our time. I do find though, like, I have been encouraged for people that I've read their work and I really like their work to just email them. Like, as terrifying as that is, like, the worst thing that could happen is that they never answer you. The best thing that could happen is that they're like, wow, fantastic, I'd love to chat with you more, and they can become an informal mentor. And I don't know if we can have like sessions where we all get together and
write the scary email.
Write the scary email together. I mean, I know that those kinds of things sound petty and silly, but I'm a huge proponent for them. I'm like, if we're all doing it together and it's like you can't leave the room and we have a list of 5 people to email, then there's some accountability.
I
love love it.
All right. Well, I think I just put myself into a corner because I haven't emailed that person.
Like
right.
someone can even come over and literally hit send for you. Like, you know, you can't do
Yeah, we're like, okay, everybody's on their Zoom. Everybody collectively hit send. And then like, I'll make sure that we get beer and pizza and snacks that we can gorge on afterwards and have like a little chill.
Liquid courage.
Yes, liquid courage. All right, well, I'm going to take us back to the big room. Thanks for sharing, guys. Well, actually, maybe, is it weird to just like rip people out of the room? Should I give them like a minute?
Oh, you could give them like 30 seconds. Don't give
Okay.
them a minute.
Okay.
Kristen, who is your advisor?
Pyburn and, well, Pyburn's my primary advisor and Dr. Alcantara, but I'm doing a double. So I also have another advisor in EAS. So it's a lot of cooks.
What does that stand for?
Earth and Atmospheric Science.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. How do you like Anne? Have you been working with her?
Yeah, I mean, I did my undergrad here. So sometimes you've been like working for someone who's like watched you grow up. Half the time I feel like her expectations are way too big, and then the time I'm like, let me spread my wings. So it's hard to find that balance, but overall, like, I know she's there for me, so like that's good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I totally get that. The expectations sometimes from your advisor is, whew, it's sometimes I'm just like, oh, I'm not you. Like, I have to sleep. Like,
yeah.
You know?
Truth. All right. I will see you all at the big room.
Sounds good.
From home this fall. They're managing. Well, I can afford to teach late in the day. You probably don't have that luxury. It's a family, so.
Yeah, it's hard.
So is that a regular feature of Zoom that I've only just now learned about, that when you do breakout sessions, it stops recording automatically, or do you have to set something up?
I think the recording follows the host, because Tori was in our breakout room and it recorded our bit. So wherever host goes, that's what's going to happen.
Interesting.
Is my theory, but I've also, this is a sample size of 1. You're muted, hun.
Oh, okay. They're coming back. I was like, oh no, did people
We
get
lost
kicked
her.
out? that's everyone back in the main session. Cool. All right. Well, I don't know about you guys, but my group had some fruitful conversation, sharing some frustrating or difficult experiences. We also got to hear from one another, some advice from kind of our peers about how they've handled certain situations. So I hope you guys also had a good discussion with your group. I'd love to have someone from one of the groups bring a situation to the main group that we can then pose to Dr. Suslak and Mackenzie. They have been generous enough to agree to not have questions in advance and just discuss things candidly here with us. So this is your chance to put them in the hot spot. So can we get one person to volunteer the scenario or one scenario they identified in their group?
By the way, if I could chime in really quickly, I hope that's not the first time that you all have ever broken up into small groups and talked about weird things going on with your advisors. This should be part of your sort of regular routine. Check in and compare notes.
So I can go ahead and chime in. So I'm a relatively senior student, and a lot of the conflict I think I'm having with my advisory committee right now stems from me not being direct enough with them initially about how my goals were shifting away from what my CV says and towards some other stuff. And now I feel like they fully don't understand that I value, like, for instance, teaching a lot more than the other things that I'm still expected to be doing for the lab and stuff. So we kind of talked in my group about how to prevent that kind of stuff from happening for a long time, and to like stand your ground about what your values and goals are initially, rather than just doing all of the things continuously. So maybe something like that, like how to discuss with your mentors what your values are and what you want to do, even if their retorts are, but you're good at the other stuff and that's what's going to get you a job. So maybe some advice on that.
So is this the part where Sara and I?
Yeah, for instance, what if you tell your committee, hey, I really like teaching, and they say, well, you can get a teaching job with a good research CV, but you can't get a good research job with a teaching CV, so don't do the teaching part, do the research, and then everything will happen. And to be fair, I think on the job market, that's patently untrue. So.
Lana, you said one thing that surprised me, but maybe in a good way. Do you, like, you were talking about your relationship with your particular advisor, but with your whole committee, do you mean like you talked to each one of them individually and they all said the same thing, or do you mean that you had a group
separately, as a group, over years, several times?
So this is not about friction between individual relationship friction. It's kind of the whole committee is giving you pushback.
Yeah.
Interesting. Also interesting that your whole committee is on the same page, because that's not always sort of the case. Wow, I don't know. Let me start by saying, so I'm excited to be here among other reasons, because like when I first started I was on tons of committees. The way a new professor gets sort of like stuck on everybody's committee to fill in the missing slot. Over the years, it's wound down a little bit, and then I was director of undergraduate studies for a stint, and then I was gone all last year. So I actually don't know most of you. To meet you for the first time, Tori, I know a little bit. Lana, we've talked a little bit over the years, but so it's really nice to meet everybody, kind of see what people are talking about. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me personally, I always just right from the get-go really try to stress that the point of this whole thing is to help my advisees sort of do whatever it is that they want to do, or so whatever their career goals or research goals are, like to sort of do that as well as possible, right? I realize that some of my colleagues probably have a more micromanagerial style, like they want you to be what they envision for you. But so I'm not on Lana's committee. I'm not sure that I would have given you that advice. Trying to think if I could put myself
Well,
in
I
the role.
think that's a good, because that's what
It's not a universally held position, right?
Well, what if your advisor wants you to fill a role that they see you filling and that they see your skills playing into? How do you tell them? Maybe it was even helpful to just hear it that way, and I could tell them, you're trying to make me you when I don't really want to be you. Or something like that. Like, I don't, just because I have skills in that way doesn't mean that's what I want to develop. Maybe that's been helpful. Any other advice like that?
I mean, it doesn't sound like if it's most of your committee, it doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot of other people out there that you would switch committee members at this stage unless something really extreme was happening. So you might just have to sort of agree to disagree. Prove them wrong. Use it as an inspiration to sort of prove that you were right all along. I mean, I'm sure that they're pushing you in this direction out of sort of fears and concerns about sort of your job prospects, being able to sort of imagining what that looks like. Sometimes the issue has to do with how long some of us have been out of the game. So if your committee consists of people who haven't actually been on the job market in the last decade, then they might also be working off some dated information. And the people to turn to might be some of your sort of recent graduate classmates or people that you know through that anthropology alumni network that have graduated in recent years and tried to do what you're trying to do. I mean, that's the thing. If you're in your first year now, and there's somebody a couple of years on that is doing what you think you want to do at some point, then that's a good person to connect with and sort of seek out as a peer mentor. And Sarah, what do you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to give Mackenzie a chance, but I'll just say briefly, I think, I suspect what Dan just said is probably accurate, that they're thinking research and publications are really the ultimate currency in the game, and we want to protect you, we want you to get a job. And, you know, my generation, you didn't have to have teaching experience. You didn't have to show that you were a good teacher to get a job. And so if that sort of is the model that they're operating on, they're thinking, you know, there are some fundamental things you need, and the other is kind of gravy on top of that, right? Which, you know, at certain kinds of institutions is accurate, but at other kinds of institutions might not be. Yeah. But let's let Mackenzie jump in here.
Oh, because I'm not at the same place in my graduate career as you are, I don't have as much relevant material to share because I'm still in the process of working out what I even want to do for a thesis and trying to figure out like what interests we're going to pursue. So it's more of a dialogue instead of I'm on one path and then all of a sudden want to change. But my question, and this is a genuine question, I'm not trying to like, haha, got you. Like, what have you told them specifically, this is not what I want to do and I'm not doing it? Like, is that a possibility? That's a personal question that I have just as someone who might run into this in the future. Like,
I mean, I think the closest that I've gotten so far was taking the teaching fellowship that I'm currently on rather than taking the COAS fellowship, which would have been just a writing one. That's the closest I've gotten. And then because COVID hit as well, now we're also kind of kicking the job apps down the line. Yeah. So ongoing conversing. But
is it a future faculty teaching fellowship?
I'm future faculty right now. Yeah. Yeah. And that was they were very unhappy I made that choice.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. But I think it's been helpful to hear, like, talking to students who or former students or people who have gone those routes. I think it's been helpful. It was helpful for me to hear like standing your ground rather than just kind of, okay, thanks guys. Like knowing that they're trying to help, they're definitely just trying to help, but maybe making clear that like the help they're giving is disconnected from, I also think I suffer from the advisors from a different job market era than, so maybe finding younger faculty in the department to talk to.
Well, I just want to jump in really specifically. I realize hearing you now, like I've been on actually both sides of this argument specifically about the Future Faculty Teaching Fellowship versus the COAS Fellowship. The sort of the bigger news is it's awesome when you have two things to choose from, like how cool is that? So congratulations. But I realized I was exactly on the side once of an argument where the student, I really thought the student should have taken the COAS fellowship, but her advisor wanted her to take the Future Faculty Fellowship. Part of it, I mean, so if you really want to pursue a research career, then you definitely should get like a nice chunk of teaching experience, because that's the world we live in. But there are some diminishing returns. You can only teach section of Intro to Cultural Anthropology so many times before another section doesn't do anything for you in terms of your resume. And I think probably almost without an exception, we don't want you to get stuck in one of these dreadful underpaid adjunct positions where, you know, any possibility of a decent salary and standard of living is kind of slipping away because they've already figured out that you'll work for peanuts and there's no incentive to hire you on properly. But the Future Faculty Teaching Fellowship is especially awesome if, for example, you are a Hoosier or you just love Indiana and you need or for whatever reasons or want to stay in Indiana. Like get into the network now, get connected with people at regional campuses and start the process.
I would say tangentially related, and this probably doesn't apply totally to your scenario because it's more complicated than I've yet dealt with. But one of the things that I learned this summer is that you don't totally have to agree, I don't think, with your advisory committee on everything. And like, sometimes you won't, and it's also just okay. Like, you can just do the other thing if that's what you feel like doing. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's like allowed for me to say as a graduate student with 2 faculty members watching me, but like, you can just do the other thing. They're not going to love it, but you can.
I think it'd be great to hear another scenario, but it's making me think of one issue that I think is relevant to a lot of you, which is that graduate school is a process, and it is a process that extends over time, and you will change over that time period, which means your interests and your goals will also change. And an advisory committee and a research committee, they're not set in stone, right? I mean, even your advisor is not necessarily set in stone. If you feel that you've moved in a different direction and you need different people advising you along the way, it's supposed to be flexible. I know it feels sometimes as if it's not, but really you can switch, and people do switch, and they take people off and they add people, they even change their major advisor. That's how ideally the system is supposed to work. It's supposed to be flexible enough to accommodate your own evolving interests and directions. And that's something you should always keep in mind. Even, I know it feels hard, and you can always come to me or whoever's in the DGS role if you feel you need a mediator in that process. But I think most faculty, I would hope, are also recognize that and are open to that possibility. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I know, especially for those of you who are still forming your advisory committees, that can be very anxiety provoking, because you feel as if, oh, am I locking myself into something? And I always say to students, yes, I'm happy to be on your advisory committee. I'm happy to be your chair, and you can always take me off. Right? I mean,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
That's
Mackenzie.
a big deal. That's a big deal. Sorry, I'm pointing this way because that's where you are on my screen, Dr. Friedman. But yeah, one of the first things that my advisor when I was visiting IU told me was that I was free to switch if she was not the person for me, or if that I was not there for her, that she was there for me. And I think to people that are still trying to decide who's going to be on your committee or who's going to be your chair, or whatever, if there's a way to gauge that response and see whether or not that's something that they are comfortable saying, I think that shows a lot as to whether or not y'all will get along for years in the future.
That's very helpful. I appreciate that, Sara and Mackenzie. I do think that especially early on as new graduate students, you have a sense that you have chosen something for life and there's no flexibility. So I think it's really important to hear from the Director of Graduate Studies, right, that there is flexibility and it is meant to be an evolving process. So I really appreciate that. Any last thoughts on that scenario before we jump on to another question?
Can I just quickly, the last thing you said, Tori, is like interesting and important to me. Another thing I always try to tell my students is that this struggle that Lana's having right now with her committee, she's not necessarily figuring out what to do with her life. She's just trying to figure out what to do next, right? This doesn't have to be about her entire life course. It just has to be about what's going to happen the next couple of years, because things might change again in significant ways. So the pressure of like your whole life, that's a lot.
It is. And I really do think that sometimes the experience of graduate school can make you think irrationally like that, right? It's a big choice and you're evolving as a person and as an academic. So I think it is really helpful and important to hear from all three of you. You know, this is not a life choice, right? This is about a specific period of time, and that time period can change and involve different people when that's necessary. So, okay.
I just feel like as a grad student, I sort of want to push back on that though, because like, yeah, we're constantly told like it's just a phase, like you just got to get through it, it's a rite of passage. But it's to us, it's still our life, and like we should be enjoying and doing what we're passionate about in each moment of that life. Like I just like want to stand that ground of like, if you don't agree with your advisors, it's okay, because it's your life, not their life, and you should be doing what you want to do now, not later. If you want to do something now, you should do it now and not wait, because we don't know if we're going to be here in 2 years or when we graduate, you know, so that's just, sorry.
I think it's also quite difficult because our funding cycles are very extended, right? You know, the time you turn in the application to when you get the thing, to when you get the contract, to when you get it's a year-long process. So then you kind of are, for grants, planning into the future, for fellowships, planning into the future, for jobs, once you get to that level. So I will say I've recently been seeing CAPS and doing anxiety workshops and all that, and that's helped me with this like future predicting kind of thing, to be like, you have to strike a balance between 1 year from now on the academic cycle and 5 years from now the rest of your life. That's a difference between rational and helpful anxiety and irrational, not helpful anxiety. So yeah, I think all of that is good to kind of put together in a sense.
The corollary of what Mecca is saying, you can't know the future, but in the meantime, if you take the best possible care of yourself, then hopefully you'll live a long life and have many, many productive years and have lots of opportunities to sort of explore different possibilities. If you burn yourself out now, then it is going to be your life. That's all you'll have left. So don't do that. Like take care of yourself so you can plan for the long term. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Mecca, that it's important to have perspective, but that it's also important to realize that it is a very visceral experience that we're having in this moment. And because of that, we do need to care for ourselves and make decisions that are best for ourselves as individuals, even if they don't correlates with what is perceived to be best for us at an advisor or institutional level.
And this moment doesn't exist in a vacuum. What we learn as graduate students about how to advise and how to mentee from our advisors and from the choices that we make and that we're comfortable making for ourselves, that will inform what we're comfortable going forward into the job market if we are going to be advising, asking our students in the future to do. So I think it's all very related.
Yes, very cyclical. Another question that was asked is about expectations with advisors, setting expectations specifically in terms of time. So maybe an advisor says, I'm here for you, I'm available whenever you need, but you find that you're not getting the time you feel necessary with that advisor, what to do in that situation.
What I've found that works for me is just to continue asking, which does take up, it's not a perfect system. It does take up a lot of my time to continuously ask for time, but I mean, advisors are also very overwhelmed sometimes and have a lot of different requests. So like being a little bit understanding that sometimes things fall to the wayside and you have to continuously ask and carve out space for yourself. I think don't be afraid to continuously ask and hound people. I mean, there might just be no other way that your email gets seen in the thousands of emails I'm assuming that professors get every day.
If you, depending, the circumstances really vary, but if you know yourself and how you work best well enough, then maybe try working out a whole schedule for a year or for a semester or whatever it is with your advisor in one fell swoop, so you don't have to keep having that conversation. That might not be good for some of you. Some of us, like me, maybe work in a more haphazard way, but if you need sort of regular check-ins, then try to set that up early in the year before things get kind of crazy and people get distracted and gun shy about committing to things, and just make it a part of the routine. I'm bad at that, but that's something I wish I had done a better job of when I was a graduate student.
I think following off of that, or what I said earlier, asking your advisor how they would like to, if they are saying that they can commit to all of these things and then are not meeting their commitments, how, just be very honest and be like, do you want me to remind you? Do you want me to ask for more time? Do you want me to just ask someone else? Do you want me to switch advice? All of these conversations are pretty uncomfortable. They make me very nervous, but I've had to have them, and they ultimately make for a more productive, because it is a relationship. At the end of the day, that does require work, and you have to give people the opportunity to do that work.
If if it's a chronic problem and you have somebody else, I'm always really, it makes me deeply uncomfortable when people just connect themselves to one mentor or one professor to the exclusion of, or professors that sort of seek out that kind of relationship. That just makes me leery, but it works for some people. I don't want to say that's always the wrong thing to do, but hopefully you have other people that you're talking to, and if one of them is giving you really good help and feedback, and the person who's supposed to be your main person is just continually neglecting you or blowing you off, then you're entirely within your rights to sort of rethink your committee configuration, or have that frank conversation and say, if this is too much for you, I'd love to still have you be on my committee, but maybe Tori will be my new chair, or kind of rethink the structure of this thing. I think that's a totally fair and reasonable thing to ask for.
I might jump in really quick here, because I did have this exact situation of feeling the need for more time with my advisor. And to reiterate what Mackenzie said, it was very uncomfortable, but I found that it was helpful once I said, this is my working personality. This is the type of person I am generally, as an individual and as a worker, as a graduate student. And I need, fill in the blank, I need this many times with you per week, per month, per year. And then, is that reasonable for you? Because that requires a yes or no answer, rather than just beating around the bush and saying, well, let me know if that doesn't work. Well, let me know in the future if this isn't feasible. It's a direct question, and that can feel very awkward, but it gets you an answer. The answer is yes or no, or well, that depends. And it prompts the conversation that then allows you to, exactly what Dr. Suslak said, set out a schedule. Maybe they say, you know what, once a week is very unrealistic for me, but I can do once a month. And then you can say, great, let's put that in our schedule, right? So I had to do that, and I wish I had done it earlier. So that was the process I went through.
And then I feel like if you do that, it feels less like begging for time and more like, this is who I am. Please tell me if you can help me. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like once I stopped being really timid about like, hi, I hope I'm not bothering you, like the relationship just got easier for everyone.
Yes, for sure.
Hey,
For sure.
Tori, can I ask another question off of
Yes,
this?
please do. Please do.
Dr. Suslak, you mentioned like being leery of depending so much on one person. And this is only my first semester, but I am having like trouble finding other people that I could potentially ask for help in this like web platform world we're in right now. And I'm like, oh, this person like could be good, but you know, sometimes I just like don't know who everybody is and how everyone functions, because it's hard for me to ask for feedback, you know, like for Tori, for example, I'm like, hey, what do you think about Professor X or whomever? So that's like something I'm struggling with.
It's got to be so much harder now. I mean, frankly, I'm on several committees just because my office is right next door to Professor Sterling's office. And when people are waiting in line to talk to him, I would just be able to say like, hey, what's your deal? We just start talking. And like a month later, I'm on that person's committee. So, and that kind of serendipity or whatever just isn't happening right now, alas. So, and the spring is probably going to be the same. I mean, the obvious way that people meet each other is through sort of taking their classes and sort of interacting with professors on that basis. But yeah, I don't know. The pandemic gives you a perfect excuse to just cold call people and say, hey, I'm new around here. I haven't taken your class or anything. I would visit your office hours if that was even a thing, but it isn't. So like one thing, I'm sure Sara Friedman, Professor Friedman says this all the time, but it's just so, especially if you're new, it's so important to keep reminding you that your advisory committee and your doctoral research committee are two different things. And so whoever it is that you're working with in your first couple of years, that it's not in any sense locked in that that's who you're going to be working with all the way through to the end. It's convenient maybe if you're mostly working with the same people most of the way through, but whoever it is that you're talking to right now, you're not making lifetime commitments to each other. You're just talking to them right now, and they're helping you through the process, and they should understand that's the case too. In case they're like, oh, I'm so busy and overcommitted. Like, no, you're just asking for basic advice and feedback. So I would like to imagine that all of my colleagues are totally happy. I mean, I know I haven't gotten to meet for all of these reasons, I haven't got to meet a lot of you before, so this is just a great excuse. But if you were to send me an email, it might take a couple days, but I would do my best to respond. I also have to say the thing that Mackenzie was saying earlier, like I always tell my students to just keep poking at me, because sometimes it takes a few tries, but it's really not personal or anything. I am just doing triage in my inbox all the time.
Mecca made a really good point in the chat that you can always ask your fellow graduate students. AGSA meetings are a great place to do that, or the Anthro grad list if you have just a general question that you don't mind people knowing about. I would also say you can always contact Dr. Friedman, the DGS, or if you're sending out like cold call emails or whatever, include at the bottom and be like, if you don't know the answer to this or you don't know how to advise on this, can you point me to someone who would? Because one of the things that I've noticed is that the faculty that I reach out to can't always answer my questions, but if I ask them to kick it down the line, they can always point me to someone else that I can try to navigate it with.
And I would say also for, those of you in your first and second year where you're still trying to put that advisory committee together, in addition to asking other graduate students, more senior graduate students, your temporary advisor also should be someone you're having these conversations with who, because that person has a sense of your general interest, could also advise, or at least could say, well, you might think about taking a class with this person to see whether you're a good fit. That person is a good fit for your advisory committee. Now, it doesn't always work out that way. Maybe the person isn't teaching something appropriate and you still need to approach them. And then it is really about just getting up, the gumption and in our now mediated era, just writing to that person or popping in on the office hours if they have an open Zoom link for office hours. Yeah.
We also just slip in really quickly that at least when I was a graduate student, our sort of amongst ourselves, our understanding of how this process worked of finding people, identifying people and talking to them and forming committees. The lore where I was a student is that it was really important to have a committee member for the sole reason that that person was amazingly good at signing things on time, at knowing the deadlines, at doing the forms. Like it doesn't have to be this intellectual romance in every single case, right? You can have somebody in your committee who has nothing to do with what you're interested in, but you just know that you can count on them to do the paperwork for you or to let you know when deadlines are coming up or there's some cool opportunity. That's a kind of a specialized skill that some of us have more than others. And if you find a person who seems to check that box for you, that's great. It doesn't matter whether they're even in your subfield or have any sort of specific advice to give you about your research interests. So don't forget about that possibility.
And it might be helpful. I find as specific as you can get, the better. So maybe you sit down and write down 5 qualities. Like, this is what I need in an advisor to feel supported and to successfully progress through my program. And then go to a senior graduate student like Mackenzie and Mecca have mentioned in the chat. And maybe the first thing is somebody who lets me be independent, that doesn't check on me often. I'm gonna throw Mackenzie Corey under the bus here. He gave that advice to me once. He said, you know what, I'm different. I need somebody who gives me space. And he was able to find someone that does that effectively for him. So when you are able to have a specific quality and you say, hey, does this person allow you to be independent? No, they actually check up on me pretty frequently. Great, that's great to know. That wouldn't work for me. Maybe that works for other people. Then go to the next quality. Is this person prompt with emails? Not as great as other folks, right? So I think if you're able to pinpoint a few things and take them specifically to others who will give you honest feedback, that can help you make decisions about who might be a good fit.
I think following on that, boundaries is a really important thing to consider when thinking about what sort of advisor you want and how the advisor navigates boundaries. I've had experience with a lot of different people across the department. And as a student, I am personally very sociable. So like, I like to be on friendlier terms with my advisor. But I also know that there are a lot of professors who want that distance. There are a lot of students who want that distance. There are also a lot of professors who maybe don't want that distance. They would like to be like friendlier with their advisees, and you as a mentee need to know whether or not like being on a first name basis with my advisor is comfortable. So think about that when you're thinking about what sort of advisor boundary role you want to have going forward.
Yeah, that's helpful. And what I'm gonna do, just with the last little bit of time we have, and I encourage you, please stay, even if it's just 1 minute over. I'm gonna share my screen to show you the website URL that you can go to on the IU anthropology page to find your subfield specific student annual checklist that you can take with you to your advisor to use as a template for discussion. Bye, Dr. Suslak. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, I feel like we barely got started. Feel free to keep on
I'm sorry.
emailing
That
me.
was, did you say you had to go, Dr. Suslak?
No, it was Dana.
Oh, it
who
was
said it.
Dana. I apologize.
That's fine. I know what I'm not one. No, but let me also, for Dana or whoever else, like I feel like we barely got started on this. If anybody wants to keep talking in some other capacity, they can feel free to shoot me a line, or I'll stick around for right now. I don't have to go right away.
Okay, awesome. So after I show you all this page, if you do want to stick around, please feel free to do so.
While Tori is doing this, I just want to really quickly say that I want to echo something Tori, I think Tori, you said in the chat. Don't worry about offending faculty. We have pretty thick skin, most of us. And you know, you need to be prioritizing your own needs and interests and fit. So if you've had a conversation with someone and you then decide they're not a good fit, just be, you know, adult about it and write and say, you know, after talking to more people, thinking about it more, I've decided that, you know, there's a better composition for my committee, but thank you very much for taking the time to have the conversation with me. And then everybody moves along and it's fine. It's when people are left in this sort of unclear zone that things can get messy. So it's just really much better to be direct and upfront about it, would be my only comment on that.
Yeah, that's great. So as you can see, I pulled up the bioanthropology form, but you can find your subfield, and I'll put that URL in the chat. Dr. Friedman, I don't know if you wanted to mention how this works with advisors, but this is something that you can take and use as a launch pad for your discussion, and that you should be using annually, which is new to me, but once you figure that out, this can really help you start having those more detailed discussions with your advisor.
That wasn't a thing for you, like I thought we were supposed to know that we advisors were supposed to have those forms, and like when we meet with you to kind of go through and fill them out. And I thought that was just a thing we all did.
That's great. I'm really glad for your advice. I did not know that this was a thing.
Not terribly long ago, we even sort of updated those forms. They probably need to be updated again, but yeah, we should. That's a thing that should happen. You should like sit down with the form and kind of go through it.
Yeah, and then Tori, maybe we should send this to, not just share it in the chat, but send it to the Anthro grad list. So even people who aren't here today have it, because I find this form just incredibly helpful. Because I can't keep everybody's situation in my head, right? And when I see the form, then it just all clicks in. I'm like, okay, this is what I know. These are the other people on your committee. This is what you're thinking. This is what you've done. This is what you still need to do. So it's really helpful to jog memory, as well as just to make sure that everyone's on track. Yeah.
Also just huge, especially, oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say really quick, is this something that we could send like department wide? Because I, until this year, also did not know that this was a thing. So I think maybe it's just one of those things that falls by the wayside sometimes. So maybe everyone could use a refresh.
Yeah, especially because this is the time when I yank out that form the most is like right sort of before class, like when we're figuring out what classes to take next semester, because that's where because there are kind of those aerial things, like you have to do so many number of sort of ethnographically focused courses or a methods course, and this is where we start, you know, when the question is, hey, I'm not really sure what class I should take next spring, should I do this or this? I need to look at the form and see like what slots are still there to be filled.
Yeah.
You don't want to be having this conversation when you're like when you're advancing to candidacy and you suddenly figure out that you didn't do the whatever class in your first semester.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I know we're over time. This was a lot of really important information. So thank you to Dr. Suslak, to Dr. Friedman, to Mackenzie. Of course, we could keep going. So if you do have questions, please send them their way. And you'll get an email shortly, as will all the rest of the grad students, with the link to that specific webpage. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Tori, for a great session.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. Cheers.
Good to see everyone. Thank you, Dan and Mackenzie. That was super helpful, I think. And